A little bit of background and experience about Adam Lewinberg, our speaker for today. He is the president of Postal Advocate. We are the only mail audit and recovery firm in the US and Canada. We manage a portfolio of over 135,000 pieces of mailing equipment across the companies in the US. He speaks and teaches nationally on mail savings and industry trends. He is the former industry co-chair for the Boston Postal Customer Council, and he also has membership with the Mail Systems Management Association. He has certifications in CMDSS and MDC. He's also a featured writer for the Mailing Systems Technology magazine, and also worked for one of the largest mailing vendors for over 17 years as the Director of National Sales for Presort, Tabletop Inserters, Addressing Hardware, Software, and Green Offerings. He was also one of the top 5 account managers nationally, working with some of the nation's top accounts. Postal Advocate is not affiliated with any mailing vendor, so we offer unbiased advice. Over to you, Adam.
Thanks, Doris. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for being on the call today. Today we get to talk about one of my favorite topics, maybe not everyone's, I'm sure, but we really enjoy helping people around their mailing equipment expenses, and it's something that we're really passionate about. So we're going to give you the tools that you can use on your own to be able to manage these categories. And at the end, we'll be able to show you some ways that if you do need help, we certainly can provide that. But the goal of today is to arm you with, a much greater knowledge that you may have on this category so you can make the most informed decisions. So what we're going to cover today: how do you choose the right mailing solution for your organization? How do you get the best equipment vendor? How do you choose the best vendor? There are a few different vendors in the space that you need to consider. How to negotiate the best deal. Eliminate fees. There are a lot of fees in the mailing industry, so it's important for you to be able to watch out for those. How to find billing overcharges. You would be surprised how often the vendors bill at the wrong rates. How do you pay for postage at the lowest costs? So how do you make sure that you're having the right funding methods? How do you recover lost postage from dormant accounts? Every postage meter is a bank account, and so when people turn meters in or change vendors, oftentimes they forget about that money. We're going to go over how you can keep track of it and make sure you recover it. How to cash in rewards programs. One of the vendors has a rewards program around postage, and we'll explain that to you, so if you have points, you can cash them in. How do you save on mailing supplies? And how do you gain visibility to your mailing spends? And that sometimes is one of the hardest things, especially if you have lots of locations. So choosing the right mailing system. We're not going to, there's lots of different types of pieces of mailing equipment. We're going to cover the most common that we find in most organizations. We're going to cover postage meters and mail machines, which is the most common, PC postage, which is probably the fastest growth segment in the mail industry, folders and inserters, and letter openers. And these are probably the most common items people are buying from the mailing vendors. But if you need information on other items, you can check out our blog. I've written and published articles in Mailing Systems Technology about multi-carrier mail and shipping systems, incoming tracking systems, addressing systems, and frankly, just about anything that you might be buying in this space. You might want to check out our blog, or feel free to reach out to us directly, and we can give you information about it. So mailing systems. So there are 3 core types of mailing systems to consider. There's PC postage, which means you generate postage from a computer. Usually they're in the cloud. Hand-fed mailing systems, like the picture you see below, where you can feed them basically one at a time through a machine. Or automatic feed mailing systems, where you can stack up a pile of envelopes onto a stacker, hit start, and it shoots it through automatically, seals it, and stamps it. Okay, so let's break these down. This is the most common segment that people will have mailing needs. People need postage meters, or they need equipment across all their locations. The other items, folders and inserters, letter openers, tracking systems, they might only need at their high volume locations. So this is the biggest category. We'll probably spend the most time here. So let's go through this chart. The typical postage usage where we see, and these are ranges, obviously some people can go higher than these, some people are lower than these, but what we typically see is people spending less than $300 a month in postage consider PC postage. If they do shipping volumes where there's a lot of priority mail, we'll talk about some reasons why PC postage might actually be a better solution for some, and those volumes could get much higher. Hand feed mailing systems, people usually sort of cap out at around $500 per month, and then automatic feed mailing systems, usually over $500 a month. And really, if you think about it, someone who does over $500 a month, assuming the average piece is 50 cents, is doing 1,000 envelopes a month. Do they really want to hand feed one at a time 1,000 pieces? And most of the time people have that not going as an average amount on a day-to-day basis. They'll have, statements or invoices or checks going out once a week where they have larger piles and they want to just be able to stack them up and shoot them through. So that's what we typically see. We certainly have people that are on the fences, having hand-fed machines, doing $800–900 a month and perfectly happy with it. But this is what clients typically tell us where they sort of put their thresholds. The biggest determination about how you pick these systems, at least on the mailing machine side, is speed. And the speed has dramatic impact in sort of the costs and the segments you look at. So PC postage, you're going to probably print directly onto stamp sheets. That's the most common. And stamp sheets look like this picture down below, where there's sort of a graphical pictorial on the screen of these stamp sheets. You'll generate the postage you want, prints directly on the sheet, and you peel off the stamps. Very easy to do. It's hard to put a speed on that because it's a two-step where you run it through. You process it on your computer and then you print them out and then you have to peel them off. Postage meters, though, because it's more of a one-step operation, 20 to 65 letters a minute on the hand-fed units, automatic speed 70 to 310. Assume these are manufacturer speeds. Any speed you're actually getting, I usually cut those numbers down in half based on the machine you're looking at to get more realistic speeds that people are getting. Next is people want sealing functions. So obviously in PC postage, there's no sealing functions. Hand-fed mailing systems, there's on the very basic units, it doesn't come with sealing. When you get to the sort of the mid-range and higher in that segment, there is sealing that's either optional or included. And on automatic feed machines, it's always included. So you have to determine if this is an important feature. Postage tapes. So postage tapes is when you have an oversized item, how do you run it through the machine? With PC postage, very easy. You print on label sheets, or if you have a connected printer, you might have a connected Brother or small printer connected to your computer to generate the labels. Mail machines, the low-end ones, are typically going to have like a postcard-looking tape sheet that you run through the machine like an envelope. Some of them are going to have dispensers. And as you get to automatic feed machines, they're either going to have tape like those, they're going to have a tape dispenser that you hit a button and a pre-cut tape sheet shoots out, or they're going to have a roll of tape inside the machine where the machine pre-cuts the designated lengths. Weighing. This is a really important piece. People spend way too much money on weighing for postage meters. First off, most things that are over 5 pounds in most large organizations aren't going to the Postal Service. They're going through UPS or FedEx because most organizations have contractual rates that are lower with UPS or FedEx for heavier items than the Postal Service. And even so, when you're buying heavy capacity scales, it could add $1,000, $2,000 to the price of the unit to get a 30, 70, 149 pound scale on a mail machine. So what we typically recommend to clients is buy the basic scales, the 5 and 10 pound scales for any of these packages. If you need heavier capacities, you can go to Staples or your office supply company, and for $50 or $100, you can get a 100-pound electronic scale that will more than suffice for what you need, and the weights can be key entered into the systems. Postal accounting. This is a big area for a lot of organizations. They want to track the postage by departments, by cost center, by group. They want to be able to break down their funds. This is an area where PC postage really shines because every single piece of mail can be tracked inside your location and across the entire enterprise if you're using it that way. Hand-fed mailing systems have pretty rudimentary accounting systems where they can track pieces in postage, but you can't really get a transaction level detail that's going to show you every single piece for periods of time and be able to pull up records on it. High-end automatic systems have that functionality. And then the question is, do you need additional printing capability? So with PC postage, the nice thing is in the same print run, you can print a label that has you could print your postage, your destination address, your return address, custom QR graphic or code. You can print barcodes, and you can also do full color printing. There are some of those features on high-end automatic systems, but it's just a question of what you're trying to print. And obviously space is a really big criteria if you're looking at automatic feed systems, because you want to make sure you've got enough space, not only like lengthwise, but as covers lift, as there are monitors on these units that you can, you have enough space above it, on your counters. So when you look at the monthly investment of this system, I'm going to give you ranges of where we see. PC postage costs, depending on, there's free options from the post office, but the problem with the free options is it doesn't allow you to print stamps. It only allows you to print package labels. It also doesn't give you the discounts on some of those items. Paid versions usually are in that $15 to $35 range per month. Hand-fed postage meters usually start at around $20 a month at the lowest levels, and they could go anywhere between $20 to $100 a month is where $20 to $120 a month is where we typically will see this segment. Automatic feeds are going to be somewhere between $150 a month upwards to $1,000 a month, depending on the features. The biggest feature that determines the cost on automatic feed machines are twofold. One is the speed. So as you get machines that are running at 200 to 300 pieces per minute, that adds a lot of cost. And two, do you have an internal scale in the system? So this picture of this unit that we're showing has an internal weighing system. So as you run the mail pieces through the machine, it's weighing each piece, and then determining if it's a letter or a flat, and then assigning postage. So you don't have to weigh each piece one by one. But then the other thing you have to look for on mailing equipment is, what are the charges? Are you getting charged fees for things like refills, postage advances, maintenance, rate change fees? Like, the mailing vendors all across the board can charge these fees. Some agreements are all inclusive, but lots of agreements have these unique charges that you have to watch out for. They can boost the monthly cost that you thought you were paying. And then finally, supplies. The cost when you're using PC postage, you're really paying for the tape sheets or the labels, and those usually run 3 to 7 cents per label. Most of the vendors are in that 3 to 4 to 5 cents per piece for the stamp sheets. With postage meters, you pay for ink, and it's usually 1 to 6 cents in the low end, and then less than a penny on the high end. And then the tapes, if you need oversized tapes, they're expensive. They could be as high as 13 cents a tape, depending on the type of tape you're buying. But at high-end units, it's usually less, especially when you can buy it on rolls. So that's a quick overview of the main features that you need to know about on postage meters and mail machines. Now, there have been some changes that have happened on mail. So as of, it used to be, let me back up for a sec. There are 3 classes of mail, like when you're sending parcels. There's retail rate, commercial, and commercial plus. Commercial plus used to be a different rate than the commercial, but now it's the same rate, so we don't even really need to focus on it. The 2 core rates you need to focus on are the retail and the commercial rates. But prior to January 24th, 2015, postage meters used to have the commercial rates inside of them. Now they don't. So when you're looking at doing any sort of parcel, priority mail, express mail, you're actually paying a higher rate through postage meters than you do through PC postage. So you have to pay attention to the rate discounts, because now there's a lot of rate discounts. So let's start at the basics. If you send a 1-ounce letter out, if you don't have a postage meter or PC postage, you spend 55 cents. If you do have a postage meter or PC postage, you spend 50 cents. You save 5 cents, basically 9 to 10% savings. If you're doing certified with return receipt, there's a $1.20 savings by doing electronic return receipt. If you have a postage meter, some postage meters have this. It's usually an additional option. You have to pay for a subscription service to do this. Some PC postage has these things included in it, and it's a $1.20 savings. But the big savings come from these parcels. Like if you're doing any first-class parcels, which is anything that's odd-shaped in a box, too rigid to be considered a flat envelope, you're doing priority mail express, you can see the savings. It's only on PC postage options, and the cost difference can be as high as 55% less. So the options here to consider that we're finding is either one, get a vendor-provided PC postage solution. So a lot of the mailing equipment vendors will also throw in PC postage as a complementary option, either at a charge or it's included in some high-end mailing systems. But if you're doing a lot of parcels, you want to make sure that's included because the cost difference of sending things is so high. And the real issue is that it used to be you just had to meter it. The post office is giving you discounts if you can generate it as a 4x6 shipping label. And that can be transmitted electronically to the post office, and that's why they're giving these discounts. So the opportunities, like we said, either use a PC postage solution provider, from your mailing vendor. Look for third-party PC postage solutions. Stamps.com and Indicia are the 2 main companies. They're actually both the same company. Stamps.com owns Endicia. Explore multi-carrier shipping systems that also handle USPS. So some people have shipping platforms that can rate UPS, FedEx, Postal Service on one platform, and they can handle these labels, or just pay the higher rates. But if you're doing any at the low end, it's not a huge issue if you're not doing that much parcels. But if you're in the mid to higher end and you're doing a bunch of priority mail, these savings can really add up. When you look at $1 to $2 a package or $1 to $3 a package, it really adds up. Folders and inserters. So there's three categories of folders and inserters you should think about. There's convenience devices, tabletop devices, and production devices. And the vendors might break these down in different segments, but this is sort of how I like to think about it. Convenience are those machines that are less than 5,000 pieces a month. That's what you're doing. You just need some easy way to get things out the door. You don't want to fold insert by hand. There's tabletop. You have regular statement runs and check runs and things like that, and you're doing slightly higher volumes. You need some way to automate it. And then there's production machines. You'd see them in big headquarters, in-plant operations, or mail houses. The biggest difference is what kind of monthly volume do you need is going to determine which of these systems make sense. And then the speeds of these units. Obviously, the convenience devices aren't going to be as fast as the tabletop or the production. The number of feeders you need. Like sheet feeder, a sheet feeder is an item that, like a piece of paper that gets folded while it runs through the unit. An insert feeder is something that doesn't require folding, like a business reply envelope or something like that. So how many of those feeders do you need to do your job? So if you're doing invoices, which is the most common, and you put a business reply envelope in, and maybe there's an extra sheet that goes through, you need a machine that has enough feeders to accommodate that. Do you need to insert flats, 9x12s, 10x13s? You do a lot of multi-page documents or booklets that go in. Some of the tabletop and production models will have that option. Do you need to connect it to a postage meter? So as it exits the machine, it goes right onto the deck of a postage meter and gets metered. When it exits the machine, do you need it to go onto a conveyor? Is it just a simple catch tray at the bottom? What do you need as sort of an exit? And you can see, like on the first machine on the right, it just drops into a bucket. And if you look at the machine on the on the left and at the far right, it goes through a conveyor that holds lots of pieces. This next piece is really important, scanning and intelligence. So if you're doing invoices, like I said, it's the most common, invoices or statements. Does everybody get the same number of sheets? Does everybody get one page? Or do some people get one page, some people get 4 pages, some people get 3, some 5? And does someone have to manually pull those things out and basically fold insert those by hand, because you can only automatic feed a certain number of sheets in an inserter at once? So inserters can have intelligence on them, which means that if there's a barcode or like a grouping of lines or called optical mark recognition that can be put on the document, there's going to be an electronic eye on the inserter that reads that and then automatically knows how many pages to pull into the envelope. Those markings, the mailing vendors can help you put them on. There's some simple ways to get those markings onto your pages now that weren't so in the past, that keeps you from having to have your IT department programming it, because sometimes that doesn't hit a top priority project. But that's a core function if you have variable inserting. And then higher levels, do you need sort of mail run data file validation? And what that means is you need the inserter to talk directly to a file that's on your system that's telling the inserter, this is John Jones's mail piece. John Jones is supposed to get 5 pieces, and to validate that John Jones physically had 5 pieces inserted into the envelope. It's a closed loop method that you typically will see on production machines, but some of the tabletop units now have that function. Do you need to print envelopes in line? Do you need to print a closed-faced envelope, that matches the contents of the piece? Size is a huge issue. As these machines get bigger, you can see they could take up whole rooms. So you want to make sure you've got the space to hit it. And then complexity is a big issue. Convenience machines are usually designed to be very easy. Anybody can walk over to it and run it. Tabletops can require some training, and production units definitely require some dedicated operators. Job changes, how quick is it to change between one job to another? And usually on the small machines, it's much easier than on the big machines, where there's a lot more settings, as you can see from the pictures. But the biggest thing is the price. Obviously they could range from, convenience machines can be about $5,000, tabletop units 10 to 100,000, and production units can be as high as 150,000 or more. You know, they could be in $500,000 for a large production machine based on the features. Finally, on the equipment side, we'll talk about letter openers. This will be a lot faster. The big questions are speed. You know, how fast you need these systems to be. They can be as high as, you know, 650 letters a minute. Cutting methods. Basic machines will just do a slice of the paper. You know, higher end units will mill. They'll basically grind the edge of the envelope off, which is basically safer for the contents. How can you adjust the cutting heights? You know, higher end units will have more adjustments. Feeding and stacking, is it just drop into a bin, or there are conveyors? Can you get, you know, how can you, access the paper path? The vitamins get jams. How are the chips handled? Did the chips go into a bin? How big is that bin to hold them? And then what are the noise levels of it? You know, some of these systems can be loud. If it's in an office environment, that may or may not work. So some additional features that these things have is they can have counters if you want to keep track of the number of pieces. They can have diverters if you want to segment the pieces, and they can have inkjet printers if you want to time date stamp or put a custom barcodes on pieces. So some of the main vendors: OPEX, Neopost, Pitney Bowes, FP, Martin, Yale, and Formex. Those are some of the main vendors in that space. Okay, so now that we've sort of looked at some of the hardware that's available, how do you pick the best vendor? So what we recommend is shop between at least 2 vendors, run a bid. Pitney Bowes, Neopost, Hassler, which is owned by Neopost, FP, and DataPack are the main core mailing vendors in this space, plus Stamps.com if you're looking at PC postage. So compare the systems on features and specifications, service support in your area, and you want to ask for references, especially as equipment's bigger. You don't want to just assume that they have every vendor has great service support in a local market. The total cost of ownership and lease, and then the ease of doing business. Were they easy to do business with during the bid process? Negotiating the best deal. So lease or purchase. You know, the mailing vendors are going to default. They're going to give you lease prices, right? And they're going to say, oh, we lease everything. But leasing may or may not be the best deal. You know, first off, on low end, you want to try to see, is rental an option, so you don't have to commit to long terms. And then for mid to higher end, you want to look at, does purchase make sense? What is the financing cost you're actually incurring on that lease? Probably 80% of the mailing industry is leased today. So you want to look at lease gotchas, things like evergreen clauses. If you don't renew your lease or tell the vendor you don't want to do business with them anymore by a certain period by the end of the lease, are you automatically extended into a new agreement? Is the vendor putting remaining balances? Are they trying to renew your lease early, therefore putting remaining balances from the previous lease into the new one? It happens all the time. It causes huge variations in price between one location or another because of this facet. And are there any auto renewals where they're trying to get you to auto extend your current equipment for periods of time where some of the information might have been seemingly misleading? When you get an equipment form, whether it's a lease or a purchase, question every line item on that. Some units are chargeable. Are they charging you for extra features that you didn't know you had or needed? Things like differential weighing, you know, faster speeds than you necessarily need, accounting options that maybe you don't understand. Make sure agreements are all inclusive. So make sure that to avoid getting charged with all these extra fees, make sure that the agreements include equipment, meter resets, postage advances, the ability to have the vendor advance postage to you, maintenance, rate updates, and then understand what the fees are for things like is there any program costs for their advance fees if you go above certain limits or things like that. Single locations, we recommend try to buy at the end of the month or the quarter. It's where the vendors are trying to get their best deals. Multi-locations, what we try to set up for our clients is national contract rates that work across their locations when they come up for renewal. So try to leverage your national spend to get better rates across the board into a master service agreement that you can hold and basically use for locations in the future, so you don't have to go through this every time you're trying to buy equipment. Watch out for fees. This is a fee-ridden business, okay? And we find customers spending tens of thousands of dollars on fees because they're not looking at every invoice. So this sounds obvious, but pay bills on time. So postage bills, if you don't pay postage bills on time, which is usually for the advances of postage is 28 days, which is less than a 30-day cycle, you could get charged up to 22% interest plus late fees that can be 1% of the total postage borrowed. So people, and if bills aren't paid in full, these things accumulate. It's like a credit card. Look at each invoice to validate all chargeable items. Do you understand what you're buying? Cancel vendor equipment insurance. The vendors all have equipment insurance clauses in their leases that says, if you don't provide us proof of insurance, we will provide you our own protection vehicle to cover against theft, flood, vandalism, things that could happen in your office. Most organizations forget to provide that proof of insurance, and therefore they end up paying for the vendor's insurance products. Terminate chargeable loyalty programs. One of the vendors is a loyalty program. They have free versions of that loyalty program, and they have extended versions of that loyalty plan that cost extra. Usually that extra program isn't necessarily justified. So terminate those programs. You shouldn't have to pay fees for a loyalty program that probably most organizations didn't even know they had. Make sure refill and advance charges are included in your agreements and monitored, because if not, the advance fees can get very, hefty. Look at billing overcharges. So we've found hundreds of thousands of dollars in billing overcharges that the vendors will refund if you can catch them. So here's the most typical that we find. Locations being invoiced for equipment that was picked up or not in use. So maybe you did a lease renewal for equipment, or you got new equipment, but nobody ever either notified the vendor, or they're still billing for charges that should have been canceled. Meter rentals, refills, advanced maintenance, scale rate changes that are being invoiced, but you have an all-inclusive lease that's supposed to include all those items. Sites not getting their corporate discounts for supplies, meter rentals, maintenance agreements. So if you're part of a larger account and you have a corporate agreement, you're supposed to get certain discounts. Sometimes those things aren't followed. And it's not always the vendor's fault. Sometimes someone calls in for supplies, as an example, and doesn't identify themselves as part of that corporate entity. Postage funding. So there are two ways to fund postage. You can either prepay for postage, think of it like a checking account, and there's usually no fees for that. Or you can advance postage. You can use the meter vendor's postage advance service, which basically is like a credit card. You use it all month. At the end of the month, they send you a bill for what you used. So they both have benefits. Prepaid, the advantage is there's no fees. The advance has benefits because it's very convenient. You just get charged for what you use. So some things to think about. Don't be fooled by earning interest. Some of the prepaid programs say, well, we'll pay you interest on the money you leave in your prepaid balances. The interest is so small, and only for balances over, I think, $10,000 or $15,000 for the ones that pay interest, that it's insignificant and it's not worth considering. But the advance is, if you want to make sure that you can pay those bills on time, because if you're using an advance program, if you're using an advance program and it doesn't get paid on time, it will just be absolutely cost ineffective. Up to 22% interest is not a sustainable model. Choose one postage method and stick with it. Don't flip-flop. So if you decide that you're going to use the advance model, keep doing the advance. Don't prepay in some areas, because what happens is money sits in one side of the account and then the other, and oftentimes that can create money that gets lost. Check the balance in the meter and the postage account. So know your balances, because oftentimes this money gets lost, or or we'll find tens of thousands of dollars in certain postage meter accounts that people didn't even know they had. Don't send money to the USPS unless that's required by the vendor. Use the vendor-provided method. Both Neopost and Pitney Bowes and Stamps.com will all have their own methods for doing it. And FP may still use the Postal Service, but only use the Postal Service if the vendor directs you to. Otherwise, use the vendor-provided method. It's going to be easier for them to track. And then think twice about ACH. Do you really want the meter vendors drawing directly from your bank accounts and pulling money out? Most organizations, don't want to do that. They want to wire funds or things like that, as opposed to ACH. Recover lost postage. We've found over $1 million. Actually, the number is much higher. It's more like $4 or $5 million in lost postage sitting in dormant postage accounts. So this happens because offices close, merge, turn in their meters. Maybe they change vendors. Maybe you were using Pitney Bowes and you switched to Neopost, or vice versa. So what happens is the money sits there, and it's the client's responsibility to go to the vendor's website, fill out a postage refund request form, submit that through the internet or fax it into the vendor, validate that they've gotten their funds back. Oftentimes this doesn't happen. So the other thing is, a lot of times when people have money in meters, they forget about it because that money is expensed once they send it in for postage. So if an office sends in $10,000 into a postage account, that money is typically expensed. But in truth, it's not. It's an asset. It's basically, this postage meter is a bank account. Sometimes an advance account is used for postage, but funds sit idle in a prepaid because they didn't know they had funds in it. So the steps to find the money is figure out all of your account numbers for your current and past meters. Enter these account numbers on the vendor's website, see if they have any data available with them. Contact the meter vendor to validate, is there any funds available in those meters, and check the unclaimed funds databases to see if any funds were turned in. And we have a database of about 45,000 lost postage transactions where meters have been turned in to the states as unclaimed, postage has been turned over to the states as unclaimed property. So we're typically searching that for our clients before we even start working with them. But this is an area a lot of people don't think about, but as 25%, or actually about 30% of all postage meters in the United States have been turned in the last 6 or 7 years. And this number of lost postage is growing and growing because frankly, the majority of clients forget about this and this money gets lost. Cash in loyalty points. So Pitney Bowes is actually a really good loyalty program that gives you free points for what you use in their advanced program called Purchase Power. And you get basically 1 point per dollar that you put in of postage, and supplies get points and other spends from Pitney Bowes get points. These points need to be redeemed, and they can be redeemed for either things like gift cards to common services, or they can be redeemed for credits that can be put back to your account to use for free postage and supplies for the future. So the goal is that we recommend is cash these things in. If it's just for you and your own business, certainly you want to cash that in for yourself or whatever you want. If it's a large organization though, do you really want your locations cashing in their points for personal items for themselves, or do you want that pushed back to the account as a credit? So we try to cash these things in for our clients to make sure that they're credits that they can push back. Supply strategies. So the supplies for this equipment's expensive. So what are some options to lower the cost? So first is buy in bulk. Most vendors will give you discounts off the published price if you buy multiple ink cartridges or meter tapes at the same time. You can check third-party, non-OEM, original equipment manufacturer supplies. There are lots of companies out there. If you do a Google search, you'll find them. Many of these companies are offering non-mailing, so they're basically producing them or they have remanufactured supplies. You want to check out from your meter vendor, is there any issue with this? Typically what we've seen is if there's an issue with the equipment from a service perspective using a non-vendor based supply, they charge you for that service call. So we don't push a ton of our clients to this, but if you're a single site and especially on the low end, there's usually very little issues with that. The bigger strategy that we try to do, is especially for our national accounts, is we try to ask for corporate discounts that can work across all the sites, that will work across your portfolio. And that we find is usually an easier to manage and simpler strategy, and it can get you similar savings. Visibility and oversight. This is the most important part of managing mailing spends. So it's because the mailing spends, there are lots of items to manage. It's not just the equipment inventory, it's the lease information, it's your meter rental and maintenance agreements, the model and serial numbers of these, but it's also of your leases. When do leases expire? Are you hitting these things by the right time frames to be able to act? And then how much postage is being done across all these sites to see, do you have the right level of equipment based on the usage levels of that particular location? So the most important thing we find is gaining this visibility and oversight. So to do that, what we recommend is get reports from your mailing vendors that include these items. Enter your accounts on the vendor's website. So every one of those accounts can be entered into pitneybowes.com, neopost.com, fp.com, stamps.com has their own portal. Monitor your inventory, invoices, postage balances online. Find all active locations with equipment. Most companies are going to have more than just one location, and they could have, and we have accounts that have, in some cases, up to thousands of locations with equipment. There needs to be a strategy to managing this. And then and then a strategy for continual review of this spend. So in summary, buy the right level of equipment with only the needed features. It's an incredible difference when you don't have the vendors sort of guiding you to all these extra items. Make sure you're buying from the right vendors at the lowest prices. Look at every bill, watch out for fees and overcharges. Pay attention to postage funding, recovery, and rewards. But most importantly, maintain detailed visibility to what you're spending, and that will help you manage this in a much more proactive way where you can get the savings out of this category. So what we do for our clients is we manage this for them. And we're typically working with companies that have anywhere between 10 locations to, I think our largest is around 2,500. And we managed to get in Consolidated, probably the largest mailing fleet in the world with 135,000 pieces of mailing equipment. But what we're the most proud of is by following the methods that we described in this presentation, we averaged 58% savings that has amounted to about 1.5 million per client. So everyone on our team came from the mailing vendors. We have over 200 years of experience with this industry on the mail equipment buying side. We provide the only web-based tools that provide visibility across your enterprise, across all vendors, so we maintain the visibility to your spends. And we make this category easy. Most people find that this category is actually kind of a nuisance category and kind of difficult because of all the minutia that needs to be managed. We take care of that for our clients and make it easy. And on top of that, so we've saved $57 million to our clients and recovered over $14 million in lost postage, vendor overcharges, and fees that we're talking about. Our clients are the largest companies across all industries. Doesn't make any difference what industry it is. It just matters that you have locations with, lots of different, you have multiple locations with mailing spends. But you can see we've worked with 8 of the top 15 banks, 3 of the top 10 insurance companies, multiple senior living facilities and healthcare organizations. But like I said, it really doesn't matter what industry. It just matters that there's lots of locations. And what we typically do for clients is we do a no-cost analysis of the mail spends to show you what is the opportunity for savings. And we do this for a couple of reasons. One, we do it because most organizations don't have good visibility to their mailing spends. They don't know what their spends are across their organization for them to even make an assessment to say, do we make sense as a partner? They don't know what they're spending in fees. They don't have visibility to their postage spends. They don't know if there's lost postage out there. They don't know about the variations they're going to see in price for the same models across their locations. So we analyze that in a very simple way by getting a letter of authority from the client and then working directly with any reports they have already or directly with the vendors on your behalf to try to collect that information. And then if you decide to move forward, what we focus our time on is getting you those credits, getting you the lost postage recoveries, getting rid of fees, negotiating a price catalog for you that's best in class, creating a catalog, making sure you have a negotiated service agreement in place with 1 or 2 core vendors. And then the majority of our time is spent working directly with the locations, validating the assets that they have, helping them right-size them to the right levels, and then terminating equipment that frankly they just don't even need anymore. We present all savings to you for review, and then we present everything on a web dashboard so you can see everything that's going on, including the notes of what we spoke to and who we spoke to at all the locations. And then most importantly, because this portfolio, most companies' portfolios, renew over time, they have leases that expire well into the future, we manage this ongoing so we can take care of those issues when it's the right time to do it so you can maximize the savings available. So we found with this process, it drives down to the types of savings that, that we've indicated, and it makes it incredibly easy for the client and makes it a win for everybody. And our typical model is a contingency that if we can document savings that we share in a small percentage of it. So we're having some upcoming webinars. Hopefully you found this information helpful. We believe in education as a core foundation. Every year we have rate change webinars, and we're going to have 3 of them. So rates are changing on January 26th of this year. So we're going to have 3 webinar dates, covering the same topic, so there's no reason to come to multiple. December 18th, 21st, and 23rd, you can feel free to sign up for. We'll send you an invitation out to it to see if you're interested, but it will tell you what you need to know about the new rate change, what you have to budget for. And we'll keep you abreast of new webinars that we have coming out with different educational content that hopefully you find helpful. So I want to open it up to any questions. I want to thank you all for being on this call. And I know I talk 1,000 miles a minute, but there was a lot of content we wanted to get to. So I'm going to open it up to see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Adam. So just as a quick reminder, if you do have a question, you just put up your hand and I can unmute you individually so you can ask your question. Or if you're not comfortable getting your beautiful voice online, I can also read the questions out loud that you type into the question box. Okay, so we have a couple here. Will we be getting a copy of the presentation? Yes, so there is a post-webinar email where the copy of the presentation will be sent as a link, as well as you will be able to find it on our website, as well as on YouTube and on SlideShare. Another question, how do you figure out what sites have when they're all over the place?
So we have a process that we found that works really well. So we start with, do you have any vendor relationships already? Like, is there a national agreement with any specific vendors? And if so, have they ever provided you any reports? So sometimes we get lucky and you have either a consolidated report or you get some sort of consolidated billing from one of the vendors. So that gives us a place to start. If not, we might ask, can you do a quick accounts payable export from these main mailing vendor names? And we have a listing of what 95% of the mailing industry shows up as. We then take that data and then we enter what we can find into the vendor's website and push the vendors for more detail on things like end of lease dates, postage spends, things like that. So we can give you a complete view of what you have across your portfolio. This has actually gotten a lot more important because a lot of the mailing equipment's leased. There's new lease laws in effect that basically push organizations to know the details of their leases because they have to be recorded on the balance sheet. So we're finding more and more organizations coming to us just because they need that level of visibility. We pull that together for clients at no charge, so they can evaluate our services.
Thanks, Adam. Another question, does PC postage work for all locations?
PC postage, we typically, it's going to depend. Usually we find that PC postage will work for sites doing less than $500 a month. Every company puts that line in the sand at a different place, but usually under $500 a month, it is definitely an item to consider. Over $500 a month, we find that sometimes you're going to get pushback depending on if people want, the sealing and automatic feeding functions of mailing machines. And oftentimes we find that they're not necessarily willing to give up those features. But probably 90% of most locations will be spending less than $500 a month. So there's still a large segment that fits into that profile.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Well, I want to thank everybody for being on the call today. And if any questions pop up or if there's anything you need in this category, please feel free to reach out to us. I want to thank you all for being on the call today. Have a great afternoon.